And like, that is what we're here to do, and we'll adapt if we get Schedule 3.
I saw a question from Tom Angel come up. Tom says, Chris, you tweeted that VP Harris said in your private meeting today, we need to legalize marijuana. And he says it's the first time she said that. Yeah, I have to say it was a striking moment. Vice President Harris was sitting at the front of the table underneath the portrait of Theodore Roosevelt on his horse in the Roosevelt Room. And she raised her hands and she said, I'm just going to say it. We need to legalize marijuana. And taking a moment to express it exactly that clearly. Again, I think that what we're seeing is the White House adapt to the communication that we need with our community here. 100 years of prohibition have made us a little prickly. So I think that they're learning how to interact with us as much as we are with them.
So Chris, something that you told me privately after this meeting that I think is really important for this audience to hear is, a lot of folks remember the record of President Joe Biden and the record of Vice President Harris when it comes to drug policy and when it comes to marijuana policy specifically. And let's not be shy about it. It's not a great record. Both of these folks were involved in enacting policies that, to their credit, now they are trying to amend. And one of the things that I think was really important that you said came out of this meeting was Vice President Harris acknowledged her past as a prosecutor, and explained how she has evolved on this issue. And she talked a little bit about her journey. And frankly, I think that's a message that it would be great for more Americans to hear, so they don't think this is just some cynical pre-election ploy for votes, but that these folks have really evolved. And not only do they want to change marijuana policy in the future, they actually want to address, they want to provide relief for the folks that were hurt by the very policies they formerly advocated. So perhaps you want to weigh in a little bit on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that one of the striking things about today was that Vice President Harris took on her record head on. She talked about her experience as a prosecutor in San Francisco. That's an elected position, by the way, there. So that, it's a political office in its own way, but she was the prosecutor in San Francisco back in 2005. And again, she talks in context of having experience with it. President Biden himself was a different kind of what we call drug warrior. He wasn't a prosecutor, but he ended up promoting some bills that threw a lot of people in prison. And I do think that is what is poignant about this moment, Paul, is that we've asked every White House for 54 years to do something, anything, and take executive action in some positive direction, especially when it comes to just broad clemency of any sort. This is the first White House to do that. We thought Carter might do it, didn't happen. We wished Obama would do it. Still a super fan, didn't happen. But the fact that Biden and Harris do have this history as drug warriors makes their sort of way to chart a path to the resolution more poignant. And the fact that they're willing to put it in context of their own history. Again, let's make no mistake. In New Jersey, where I live, 3 million voters came out 3 years ago and voted to legalize cannabis. As a block of voters, we've changed state constitutions, legalized marijuana, and we show up at the polls. And we're not one party either. We're a broad base. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a notion here that politicians want to reach out to us in this election year. But I think that we're also, after 100 years of prohibition, we're not easy to win with empty promises. I think that the truth is that this White House has delivered actual executive action. They've screwed up their messaging mightily at times. But have they done the executive actions that advocates like me have asked 50 years for? Absolutely. But I agree with you. I think that the fact that they're willing to put it in context of their own experience is important in this moment. Because as a Quaker, I know this is going to sound cheesy in a way, but I work for peace. But when the warriors declare peace, when they lay down their arms, it really sticks. So I think it's really interesting what's happening.
And it's definitely a testament to the work that a lot of people on the call have done, that you both have done, and that congressional leaders across the country have taken to really get to this point of historic public support from Democrats, majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. We saw the results for Biden himself kind of setting the tone in Arizona. We've seen with Senate races that this is a political issue that does matter, and it's also good policy, and we love when those intersect. And yeah, it's been huge to see this transition, and just really want to double down on the point that this is the first time we've seen something like this from an administration. And is there significant room to do more? Absolutely. And we're going to keep pressure on and working with the administration to do that. But it is an incredible moment to get to this point.
You know, and on Schedule 3, back to voters, I mean, was there ever a ballot initiative to move marijuana to Schedule 3 at the state level? I don't think voters would have been cool with that. You know, voters went further than Congress is even considering. Voters did not incrementally legalize marijuana. They did it in a big leap. And we have to remember, when the CSA was created, it was not a small incremental reform. It was a gigantic prohibition. So again, the idea of Schedule 3 being even an incremental solution right now makes me nervous as a consumer and as somebody who's worked at the state level on this. I don't think any state would consider putting marijuana in Schedule 3 of their CSA after they regulated it for adult use. And I don't think that the Schedule 3 model really works. Again, Sonia, I don't walk out and get a ketamine smoothie and sprinkle a little craft codeine into it at my anabolic steroid cafe, thinking about all the awesome 280E tax breaks that Schedule 3 over-the-counter businesses have. It doesn't happen. So I can't buy it. I'm too old to sell this stuff to. So I am going to keep focusing on descheduling. I really do think that is because I think in any other period, again, it's because a window of opportunity is open for it. I think it's important to strike while the iron's hot, because I don't think that the window is going to be open forever.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, we absolutely, Congressman Blumenauer has been pushing for descheduling, I think, longer than anybody else in Congress, and it's a huge priority. And Schedule 3 is a huge step in that direction. A willingness to finally get it out of Schedule 1 and acknowledge that marijuana was scheduled on substance, or on stigma, not substance, not on the science, and that it's time to at least reschedule as a step in the right direction. And then I think it's up to the rest of us, to Congress, to the advocates, to the public, to really hold us all accountable to continue down the right path and make sure that that is a step in the right direction.
I'm going to really scare you now, Sonia, and tell you what New Jersey does. Really? Ready? Do you know what New Jersey does right now? And Pennsylvania and New York and Delaware. They, at the state level, dual schedule cannabis. You realize that New Jersey, New York, Delaware, and Pennsylvania haven't removed marijuana from the state Schedule 1 in their CSAs, but they've created new legal definitions for cannabis. So now you have quantum cannabis, where the same plant exists in different galaxies of the law simultaneously. What if the DEA does that? What if the DEA doesn't like moving marijuana from Schedule 1, but does like describing medical cannabis as Schedule 3? I think, again, if they took a lesson from the states, it would be a bad example, and we'd be in an even more complicated mess. So I don't like the DEA. They don't like us. They do mean, nasty things. And when it comes to policy, they run out the clock. What was the last one, Paul? 8 years before they showed up in court? Seriously. So the idea that the DEA is the final authority on this, also, I hear you. Administratively, DEA is final authority, but let's be clear. President Biden can send a letter to the HHS directing descheduling at any time. And it's the same letter that was sent for the scheduling review. I see what happened with the scheduling review as due diligence for descheduling. And quite frankly, the answers are getting back from the DEA. I love it. Keep doing it. Keep having the HHS and DEA in conflict, because that's when executive action can solve it.
And I think that's, to get back to today's event, was what I found very, very encouraging to see the vice president put that pressure on timing. DEA is independent, but to have that level of executive kind of watch and pressure is something we haven't seen before, and something that I think will move us in the right direction at the very least.
Yeah, I do think that is one fundamental difference between this effort and all the previous ones is A, we've never known what HHS recommended DEA to do. And we've been well aware now for some time what HHS has recommended. And we've certainly never had pressure from an administration where the DEA knows that they are being very closely watched with respect to when they make this decision and what decision they make. And that leverage may encourage this agency to act in a way this time that they never have previously.
JM pointed out that they removed marijuana from the CSA entirely from, cannabis is removed entirely from the state CSA in Virginia. So that's good news. Again, that looks forward to this. And we tried to talk them into that in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York, but they refused to address the scheduling at the state level. So I'm glad to hear that JM and Virginia dealt with that, because I think that if every state would do that, it's key. There's a sunset clause too. When we talk about Schedule 3 or descheduling, some state medical marijuana laws and even some state CSAs have some sunset clauses that would trigger at that moment. So that is an interesting aspect of this, but that's nothing that we covered in the White House today.
Yeah, and to quickly get back to the White House, and Morgan, I don't know how much time we have. Are there other key moments, points in the discussion that folks who are not in the room should be aware of, that we should be thinking about for follow-up, for next steps?
Well, I think that ACLU's clemency director was there. There was a really good mix in the room and at the table. And it wasn't just the three of us and the vice president and the governor of Kentucky and Fat Joe. There were some policy people at the table too. And I think that's also important. I think that as somebody who works in Congress, you know how important it is who's at the table for a meeting. So today felt not only having somebody like Fat Joe there, it kind of made a more organic discussion, but it felt less buttoned down, but it also didn't feel less substantial because of that. I think that there was a more than a pledge. I think that this really felt like the first of rather than a one-off. So I think that the White House wants to keep doing this and they want to keep working on it, and I'm here for it. So I'm really grateful to be invited today. Again, like I've used this line, but it's totally true. Like if you watch Parks and Recreation, like I am Amy Poehler right now. I am Leslie Knope. Like going to the White House